I'd like to introduce Commissioner Hladick. Please go ahead and start your presentation, which is going to be on the state of Alaska economic issues.
Good morning. My name is Chris Hladick. I'm the Commissioner of Commerce, Community and Economic Development. Last time I was here, I was the city manager of Unalaska. My life has become a little more complicated now. And as senators get to talk as long as they want to, commissioners are often put on a timer. So we are going to get started here. That didn't come out very well, but this is one of my favorite pictures of the Arctic because the ice is not there and you can see where the landmass is. And you can see where Alaska is and the Bering Sea. This is the U.S. Definition of the Arctic. And as been pointed out, we have lots of infrastructure projects we need to do in Alaska, from ports to hydrographic mapping, to search and rescue capabilities, oil spill, increased vessel tracking, communications, and Arctic-capable vessels. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about what's going on with our state's economy right now. And right now the GDP has slipped for the last 4 years in a row. Prior to this, it's never slipped longer than a year. And most of that can be attributed to oil and gas and the price of oil and gas, price of barrel oil. So what we've been through, state spending cuts at 44%, the revenues have declined 80%, state's been in a deficit since 2013, our savings are down, credit rating has been reduced. The good news is we have a sovereign wealth fund that has $60 billion in it. It is now our largest revenue source. Structured use of the permanent fund is under consideration with the legislature right now, and the legislature passed the operating budget just in time to avoid a shutdown, which I know a lot of other states are in the same straits that we are in. The bad news, the legislature has not passed revenue measures and a capital budget, and this is the longest session in history at 181 days and counting. So, Arctic policy. In 2015, the state passed its Arctic policy, and it was guidance on state initiatives to inform U.S. domestic international Arctic policy in order to best serve the interests of Alaskans. We want to ensure that Arctic residents and communities benefit from economic and resource development, improve the efficiency, predictability, and stability of permitting and regulatory processes, obviously attract new investment, sustain current and develop new approaches for responding to climate change, and encourage industrial and technological innovation. And as well, the governor is very much interested in including a stronger military presence in the state of Alaska, given the nature of current threats. So what did we do in response to this at the Department of Commerce? We've undertaken the Alaska's Economic Strategy, a comprehensive economic development strategy as developed by the Economic Development Administration. It builds on past efforts. There has been no less than 4 initiatives in 10 years to do economic development in Alaska, and I hope to get the ball in the end zone. We're building on past efforts, but the success of this is going to be dependent on the commitment of community leaders and private sector that must own this and implement it by Alaskans and not by any administration. So obviously we reviewed economic and demographic conditions. We evaluated state strengths and weaknesses, did a public process, clear metrics for goals. And as you can see, these are the communities that we performed this in, and you can imagine trying to do an economic strategy for a state as big as this is quite a daunting process. But who we met with, the seafood industry, oil and gas industry, visitor industry, mining industry, entrepreneurial business startup sector, the telecom industry, native corporations, agriculture industry, and timber industry, what's left of it. Here's some of our goals, and I won't read the slide to you in the interest of time because I know Pablo's got a timer on me now. But one of the things that, in terms of the Arctic, we want to identify 5 specific business opportunities related to increased shipping. And we want to look at encourage improvement and development of intermodal hubs and ports, especially expand port facilities in southwest and western Alaska, all the way up to Barrow, expand military infrastructure and associate research and development to support Arctic operations. And this is you can't see, there's the crystal serenity that everybody talks about. The city of Nome spent 8 months preparing for it, and it was a huge issue for them. And of course, with their dock, they can't get the vessel to the dock, so they had to lighter people in. But if this is going to be something in the future, it's definitely something we need to prepare for. Let's talk about insurance policies. I have 6 divisions in my state. In my shop, one of them is insurance, banking and securities, corporate and business, professional licensing, and we also have 7 corporate agencies that I talked about. But this is AIS data from Ed Page, who's probably going to give a talk here. But when we talk about protecting the marine environment, what do we talk about? What we need to be concerned about is putting 500,000 gallons of bunker C on the beach. That's what you need to be concerned about. First line of defense is the Marine Exchange of Alaska's automated identification system. It's a priceless insurance policy. They monitor ships in Alaskan waters. And if a ship stops moving, they start making calls, they start talking to the Coast Guard. And you would think that vessel masters would respond instantaneously when their engine quits, but that's not necessarily the case. Now, when you talk about time, there's a window of opportunity, not necessarily this time of year, but when you start talking about December, January, February in the Bering Sea, you only got so much time to respond, and communication is key. And in 2009 is when the Marine Exchange began keeping records on what's going through the Bering Straits. So here are the vessels through the Bering Straits in 2016, and you can see on the left by the meters, as shown, the largest number of vessels transiting the Bering Straits were between 20 and 39 meters. 87 of the 156 were longer than 100. Only 21 were longer than 200 meters in length. And here's the recorded transits through the strait by year from 2009. So AIS carriage requirements have expanded over the last several years, so there's more vessels showing up on the tracking system. And here's what's going through the NSR, and this is provided by the Marine Exchange as well. As you can see, there's been quite a drop-off in the number of vessels that are transiting the NSR, and for one reason or another, but you can see there's an uptick in 2016. I think you're going to see more traffic as the Yamal LNG plant comes online. What we're talking about in the Bering Straits is a sensitive ecological region, and so enhanced prevention measures and monitoring of compliance are warranted. So we need to be very careful about what we do in the Arctic. The last time I was here, I talked about the emergency towing system. There's not a picture of that system here, but here's where they are now. And quite recently, this weekend, the Laura Marisk went dead in the water off Akitan, 9 nautical miles off Akitan, and it was towed to Unalaska with the larger ETS, which is greater than 50,000 deadweight tons, and pulled this 872-foot ship to safety and put it on a mooring buoy. And the mayor of Unalaska helped develop the emergency towing system. And when we first started putting in the emergency mooring buoy, we were told it would be $1.5 million, and she got it done for under $50,000. So that's another one of our insurance policies, is having these, and it's very critical to plan and to do test runs with these things so that everybody's familiar with it. And of course, our icebreakers. I mean, In June of this year, the Senate Armed Services Committee passed the National Defense Authorization Act, and we finally got authorized icebreakers. There's a lot of us in this room who have been after that for at least a decade. And it kind of went under the radar as like no big deal, but this is a huge step forward for the United States Coast Guard, and I look forward to working to help get appropriation. Arctic development. There's a tremendous funding gap with Arctic development. As I stated before, state grants are drying up. Bonds and private industry investment have to take over. It's a paradigm shift for rural Alaska. When I was a city manager, you go to Juneau or come to Washington, D.C., you could go home with $5 million with a couple of paragraph description of the project and some pretty hard work with a lobbyist. That's no longer the case anymore, and so it takes a lot longer to get a project done, and it makes it more difficult to finance. Port planning. As you can see, here's some of the ports that need to be done. Nome is the next one in the queue with the Corps of Engineers if we can get them moving. But as you can see, there's a lot of other projects that need to be completed as well. Unalaska's project is currently underway. You have Nome, Kotzebue, Port Clarence, Gamble, and of course the North Slope Borough. And if it's interesting I'll get a little bit later, I'll talk about oil and gas, but there's a lot of projects that need to be done in order to meet the demands of future oil and gas. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that here's some of the issues with the Port of Nome that I'm sure you're going to hear about with Denise Michaels when she comes, that they're seeing increased traffic, and these are just projects that need to be done, not only to meet the current need, but future needs of economic development. And thank you that the thing is not blinking anymore. This is a Polar Pioneer. This is the largest drill ship known. It was in Dutch Harbor in 2015. They drilled one hole for $7.2 billion. They're not newcomers to the Arctic. There's some 30 holes that have been drilled in the Chukchi Sea. And the Polar Pioneer is the drill ship Hladick went aground, has been scrapped, but Arctic drilling as envisioned by the Shell project is over for now. Drilling still continues in the Beaufort Sea, and our congressional delegation is still working on opening up 1002 area in Anwar. Here's a picture of employment for the oil field, and each one of these upticks or downturns can be attributed to either a price in oil or a price shift. And in 2015, it's on its way down. I'm trying to go as fast as I can, Pablo. In 2016, the oil field paid $2.1 billion in taxes and royalties, and the North Slope Borough employment was 1,800 jobs at $105 million in wages, and 5,000 workers in Alaska. So who are the players in Alaska? Alaska Pipeline, Bluecrest, BP, Kalis, Chevron, Conoco, Exxon, Fury, Glacier, Great Bear, Hillcorp, Petrostar, Shell, and Tesoro. On to commercial fishing. It's a bright spot in Alaska. Some people look at the Bering Sea and see a blank expanse of ocean, and I see the second largest employer in a thriving economic activity. I do have concerns about shipping lanes through some of the commercial fishing areas that haven't seen that much traffic over the years. And in August of 2009, the Secretary of Commerce approved the Arctic Fishery Management Plan submitted by the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council, which prohibits fishing in the Chukchi and the Beaufort Seas. So we're not going to see fishing up north anytime soon. The Alaska brand. One of my corporate agencies is Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute, and they work hard on building the Alaska brand and the strength of the brand. In 2015, they became the #1 brand among proteins on U.S. menus, and we beat out Angus beef for the first time ever. In 2015, U.S. seafood consumption jumped by nearly 1 pound per person. This is the biggest leap in seafood consumption in 20 years. What are some of the impacts on value? Of course, some of the things that you're already aware of: strong dollar. The sustainability is a growing issue in Alaska, has a great story to tell. The proliferation of eco-labels have reframed how we message the topic. Fierce competition from farmed and imported seafood. The Russian embargo enacted in 2014 closed off one of our largest roe markets outside of Japan. And the political conflict in that region has diminished the Ukraine market as well, another key roe market. On the good side, you have global supplies of salmon tightened. The yen has strengthened recently. Long-term demand for wild seafood, and the Alaska brand is a good story to tell. Just an industry snapshot: 60,000 direct jobs, 111,000 including the multiplier, 6 billion pounds, 1.7 billion in value, first wholesale value of 4.2 billion. It is the pillar of our state's economy in some respects. And this is just another slide that shows you the importance of Alaska pollock to the amount of volume. And when you look at value, salmon and pollock are about the same, but we have other species that fill in the gap. As far as the, compared to other states, Alaska exports more than any other state, all of them combined. And here we are on the world stage, we're number 6 of all the countries for exports. I catch up with my slides here. How am I doing, Pablo?
You're really cutting into the break, and we're not going to have Alaska salmon or anything like that. So making people hungry and cutting into it.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the mining industry. There's a lot of activity going on, but there's a lot of permitting, mines in permitting. So it takes a long time to permit a mine in Alaska, as I'm sure many people understand. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Upper Kobach Mineral Project, and you can see some of the statistics there. 40.5 million tons of copper are there. ADA, the Alaska Industrial Export Development Authority, is working on the NEPA process for this project, and it is moving forward so far. Red Dog Mine. I just wanted to say that the export value of minerals was $15 billion in 2015, and it was 32% of Alaska's total exports. Fort Knox, which is just outside Fairbanks, in 2016 poured their 7 millionth ounce of gold. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Nome. If anybody has seen the Bering Sea gold, to see it in person is something else. Some of the vessels that the folks are going out on to dredge, I'm sure drive the Coast Guard crazy. It is a sight to see. The Alaska LNG project, 800 miles of pipeline, $45 billion, includes a gas treatment plant, the pipeline, a 42-inch, and the takeoff point in the Kiski. A little bit of the timeline of the legislature putting this project together. We have completed pre-feed. This is an interesting slide of the jobs that it will produce during the life of the construction project, and I won't go into it in order to save time. Where the FERC application has been submitted, AGDC, which is also in my shop, had an open season, so they're moving forward. Here's the timeline for construction and financing. And last but not least, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Alberta to Alaska Railway projects, 1,500 miles from Fort McMurray, Alberta to Delta Junction. 200 miles would be in Alaska. I'm also on the railroad board, so it's an interesting project. And as you can see, this would be huge to open up Alaska to make it cheaper to live, just all kinds of economic prospects. And with that, I'm done.
Yeah, Chris, thank you. Very, very informative presentation.